Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So it's the end of May and the weather's really starting to warm up. We're looking like we've got a good forecast ahead. So it's time to plant out our runner beans. But what's the best way of planting runner beans in the UK when you're growing outdoors? What I've got here are runner beans and French climbing beans. They're all at different stages of growth. You treat them exactly the same, not a problem. Now these were sown in pots in mid-April, and you can see the length that they've put on. These will crop a lot earlier, and the way to sow these is to sow them into individual little pots mid-April onwards, and you can get them planted out, especially if you're in the north of England. We're normally a couple of weeks behind the south, so it just helps us get that early start if we can get them sown in pots, get them out. With these longer ones, I'm going to plant on one side. The French climbing beans were sown at the start of May, and then these runner beans here were sown at about 2 weeks ago. So this time I'm going to stagger my arch here. I'm going to plant the early ones that we planted really early on that side, then the French climbing beans in the middle, and then the ones that we sowed later towards this side, so we could get that staggered harvest as well. And it works well as well because they won't shade each other out, because the sun tracks from that side, so this side gets the sun first, and then the sun will move over my head like this, the way my arm's moving, in that sort of direction. And then evening sun is on these taller plants, so the taller plants won't overcrowd the younger, shorter plants. So that's one of the things to take into consideration when you're planting these out. You can plant runner beans into pots from mid-April onwards, early May. Towards the end of May, you can get these plants that are already started out and they're growing into the pots, into the ground, when the soil reaches about 12 degrees Celsius. And what you want to do is you want to plant them each to a cane, so one plant per cane, so it grows up nice and straight. And you want a nice structure like this for them to climb up, and as tall as you can actually reach. I mean, these will grow to about 10 foot tall without any issue at all, but not everyone's 10 foot. So and runner beans, French beans, are like a nice fertile soil. And then this bed is where I did my no trench composting. If you haven't seen my no trench composting video, do go and check that out after you finish watching this video. And what I did with that was I layered lots and lots of kitchen scraps, so about 4 inches of kitchen scraps on the bed, on the surface of the bed, and then I covered it in wood chips. And over the course of winter, that's been eaten and taken into the ground by the worms. So for that reason, I don't need to add any compost to these planting holes when I'm planting these out, because the soil's got lots of organic matter into it already. These were a couple of runner beans that I planted out before the storms of last weekend, and they fared quite well. So let's go ahead and get the rest of these planted. You can see the worms that are in the soil. From all that organic matter that I've planted. That tissue can go into the bottom of the planting hole. I mean, this is a trick that's been used to get, when planting runner beans, put something like scrunched up tissues, toilet paper, newspaper into the planting hole, and that'll hold on to moisture around the roots of the beans. So look at that lovely root ball, absolutely beautiful. We'll just pop that in and cover that up. And this one, it sent out 2 shoots. I'm just going to wind it up here, and in a few minutes I'll tie them in. You can see that lovely organic matter at the top, just there, and then the clay down there. I'll chuck that tissue into the bottom as well. It would have ended up in the worm bin. I would have picked it up and stuck it in the worm bin anyway, so that's fine. It can add to the organic matter in this bed and feed and hold on to the moisture for these beans. So some people were asking what happens if your runner beans tops get damaged. Will they send out second shoots? Or if you pinch them out, what will be the outcome? What will happen is from a leaf node, just like this. I mean, that's the original shoot there. You can see it's got damaged, and from that leaf node, it sent out 2 shoots. And things like this, these bug-eaten leaves, I'm just going to get rid of these because I want a nice clean base, so that can all go, and I've got a nice clean base then. And I'm going to do the same with this, so everything at the bottom, that can all go, because I do want that airflow around the base of it. And actually I could stick these into the next planting hole as well. If you haven't got plant pots like this from food, these are just as good. Rather than sending them off to landfill straight away or off to recycling, recycle them first yourself and then recycle them. With those leaves at the bottom, they will get mud on them. That's just asking for disease issues. So we'll carry on planting these, and I'll show you some more examples of ways you can plant runner beans, especially at this time of year. We'll move on to getting these French climbing beans in now. These weren't hardened off properly, and they got a little bit damaged overnight because we left them out one night when they weren't fully hardened off. But they're okay now. They've had their hardening off period, and now they're starting to come back to life. So that's what these crispy little leaves are here. But that's fine. It's nothing too major to worry about. Little bits of damage like that, as long as it's not to the main stem of the plant, it's fine. They'll recover. It's just to the tips of the leaves. Yeah, so it might set them back a little bit when you have that little bit of damage from the cold, but they will recover. As long as it's just to the leaves and it's not to the main plant, they will recover. Let's get that mulch back in there, and that's fine. That one's okay. So look, you can see the old runner bean stalks that have been buried under here as well. And it's all good organic matter. Well, there's a root from a runner bean. And that's what happens when the roots start breaking down. That's when they release the nitrogen. So they do fix nitrogen, but that's not available most of the time straight away. It doesn't become available until the bacteria start eating that nitrogen and releasing it to the soil. So we need some more canes here. What I'm going to do is, because we're running out of canes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie some threads from the top. I'm going to peg them in. I'll show you what I mean. I'm setting that support up for these 2 plants. And these are the youngest of my runner beans. So, in case any of the Americans are watching, runner beans are normally what you guys call pole beans. And I'm pretty sure you know what French climbing beans are as well. So, yeah, I think you use the same name. So any lumps of clay, I'm just breaking it back up and dropping them back in and around. Mulch back on top, and we're good to go. I mean, considering how little rain we've had, the soil under here is I'm quite pleased with how well the soil is, especially around this middle part. I mean, it's not so good over this end because there's been less mulch, but especially around this middle section, I'm very pleased with how the no trench composting has helped with the soil moisture. I mean, we haven't had a good rain probably since the start of April. What I have done in the past with these is I've split these, you know, when they've been growing like this, 2 or 3 plants in a pot in a row, I have split them, and that split causes quite a bit of damage to the plant, and I've learnt my lesson from that. I won't do it anymore. Even though we've got 2 or 3 plants here, I'll go ahead and plant them straight out, because what you can do is you can separate them, and once they're in open ground, they're not really fussed about being this close to each other. What you can do is you can you can separate the vines as they're growing, so it doesn't really matter about them being so close. So a few weeks ago we were completely out of plant pots, and we were really struggling to figure out what to do, and now we've got a load of empty plant pots again. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to wash them out, and I'm going to put them and I'm going to store them ready for use next year. So I've tied some string to this peg. It's just a piece of bamboo. I'm going to loop it over the top of here a couple of times. So I don't like to knot it. You can just feed it in, like, just keep feeding it down until you get to the length that you want it. And then you can just peg that in the side of the bean plant that you planted, and then get that bean to climb up. So if you don't have bamboo canes, just get yourself some string and it'll work just as well. And the good thing about keeping lengths as long as possible is next year it's just as easy to use again. Oops, that one shot up. So give that a bit of a stretch, get that one up. And I'll tie this one into place as well. If you use these slip knots, all you have to do is give that a tug at the end of the season and you can pull that straight off. So that's what you can do when you don't have bamboo canes or enough sticks for your beans to climb up. Just one piece of string over the top, pegged in on both sides, and then you've got yourself a nice support for your beans to climb. At this time of year, it's actually a good time where you can actually direct sow your beans. I'll show you some of the beans that we've actually direct sowed. So over here, what we have are our runner beans and French climbing beans that we've direct sowed about 2 weeks ago, and they've already come up. They've come up in place. We're not messing about with the plants, we're not transplanting them, we're not going to give them shock. So this is actually an advantageous way of planting beans, especially at this time of year. I'm pretty sure that these will catch up to the French climbing beans that were sown at the beginning of May. We'll have a race and see which one crops earlier. So this is a slight different take on the Three Sisters planting method. And what I've got here are, I've got some volunteer potatoes underneath. And this is where I planted my potatoes last year. And I'm going to plant cucumbers as well. And this is a Telegraph improved variety. I don't know what that means, but this was actually a plant that was gifted to me by one of my friends who came by in Ramadan and dropped this plant off. So Mustaq, Jazakallah for this plant. There it is, it's planted in. And I'm going to plant these hyacinth beans into these corners here. Now, I'm pretty sure I dug out all the potatoes, but some, you always miss some, don't you? And they always pop up. This is that bed I had those massive potatoes in, so I'm not going to disturb them. I'm going to leave them where they are. Let's get that in as well. Get lots and lots of mulch over it. and we'll get those watered in nicely. These are hyacinth beans, so a type of lab. This soil here, this is purely wood chip actually. This is not open soil. This was all the wood chip straight out of my chicken run that we grew those potatoes into. So that's why there's a lot dug in. Now I don't, because you know that I don't normally dig my wood chips into the soil, I just normally lay them on top. We had the horrible June last year and we planted some of these out in May, and they just never recovered with that weather that we had in June. I just hope this year's a bit better. Let's get that climbing up there. There we go. Don't forget to hit that like for me and make sure you subscribe for regular updates like this. And check out my Three Sisters video from last year on how you can actually do the Three Sisters technique. The Native Americans have used for centuries and centuries to plant beans, squash and corn together. And the way they do that is they plant the corn, and then a few weeks later when the corn's ankle high, then they plant the beans. At the same time that the beans go out, the squash can go out at the same time. So I'm going to leave it there for this one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.